Hello, everyone. Hello. I believe we are good to go. Hi. Thank you so much for coming along. I know it is 5 p.m. Everyone is damp. And thankfully, we have the joy of the bar in 45 minutes. So if you will indulge me, yeah. I really appreciate seeing so many of you here. So it's very cool. As a kind of temperature test, because I've got a lot of slides, it'd be great if I could have a show of hands from people who really don't know anything about ADHD or diagnosis. Cool. Most people are reasonably familiar, so I will give a brief overview, but we'll mostly get to the good stuff. Hi, welcome to my talk. A little introduction about me. I'm Anna Hollenrake. I'm a lead artist at Mediatonic. I'm an art director, illustrator, game developer. I do all sorts of stuff. I've got 8 years experience in industry. You can find me just at my name on various socials, but I can't promise good content for what I post. I want to start this talk by having a few caveats. I think that's really important. The first one is I'm not a doctor. Also, I'm going to move that mouse out of the way because it's really upsetting. There we go. Firstly, I'm not a doctor. I am an artist with experience in managing my ADHD traits. I can't tell you if you have ADHD or not. There's also a lot of crossover with different things. ADHD traits can also have similar kind of presentations in autism spectrum, OCD, anxiety, so please use discretion. Alongside that, please trust your process. As an ADHD person, I am very aware that when someone stands up on stage and says, this is how you should do all these things, I'm quite likely to be like, oh, well, I'm throwing all of the things that I've built out the door and I'm going to do that now. Please don't do that. You have stuff that you have built into your processes that are really useful, that will work for you. So I'd love for you to take this as additive. Take what works, leave what doesn't. It's all good. So with that out of the way, a brief overview over my career history so you can know I'm not lying to you. I mean, I might still be, but I have done a whole bunch of different things. I've worked on VFX and UI for Magic Jewels Origins. I've worked on the entire kind of art pipeline on things like Lola and the Giant and Adventure Time Pirates of the Enchiridions. That was stuff like initial kind of look and feel concepts, prop concepts, all the way through to building them out in 3D, assembling them in Engine. I've also done art direction on indie titles, as well as visual development on others. I worked on a documentary about Nintendo, doing some of the graphics for that, which was super cool. I also had a brief jaunt in animation, and I worked on the 2D animated CBeebies show Love Monster, which was great fun. But I ended up coming back to games, and I'm now working at Mediatonic. I originally worked on the pitch team, but when Fall Guys blew up, I jumped over onto the creative services team to help kind of build that out because it didn't exist. I worked on consumer products, on marketing, oh my God, I can't wiggle too much, on NPC characters, like all sorts. I also do a lot of creative work in my own time with world building, making warm, friendly worlds that people want to inhabit. I also do tabling at Comic-Cons, and I have had a Kickstarter, and I do lots of talks as well. In general, I like too many things. I don't know why, not sure. I'm sure it won't come up again. But anyway, what is ADHD? ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. However, I think it's a bit of a crap name. I don't think it's always a lack of attention. Sometimes it can be too much attention in too many places. There are a few kind of subcategories of it. You have inattentive ADHD, you have hyperactive ADHD, and you have combined ADHD, which is the kind that I have. It is kind of theorized that people tend to move from hyperactive to inattentive over time, but I'll have to do a talk on this in 15 years and let you know. But the way I tend to see it is brain too much, too fast. I've also seen it described as race car brain with bicycle handling, which I quite like. But it's interesting talking about how ADHD can manifest. The most common image of an ADHD person is like an 8-year-old boy being loud and disruptive in the classroom, but it can also be an 8-year-old girl spacing out and looking out the window. Women often go really underdiagnosed because of socialization and learning to mask their symptoms with anxiety. That was definitely how it went for me. But it wasn't until I spoke to a lot of really kick-ass games friends, many of which were women who were doing amazing stuff, that I kind of started coming to terms with my experience. But here's some of the ways that ADHD can manifest, just, I mean, a handful out of the many. So time blindness, not being very aware of how much time has passed, means you can be late or early. I am the early kind because anxiety has kind of held me together. I find that I end up turning up way too early for things, which is not ideal. And once I started going on medication, I actually found I was later because I wasn't just stressed and planning how anything could go wrong. There's also overwhelm in social situations or lots of sounds. I can't hear someone if other people are talking nearby. I also get stuck trying to figure out what I need to do, and if there's multiple steps to the process, I'll just be kind of frozen. But the boredom that comes alongside that is agonizing, and it's really frustrating not being able to do the things that you want to do but can't quite get the oomph to get there, which is also known as executive dysfunction. Also, short-term hobby hyperfixation. I mean, it's a very ADHD thing to just pick something and decide that you're going to get into punch needle, the most violent form of embroidery, and make that your new personality because you're like, everyone's going to get cushions for the next 3 months. These are some of the things that I've aggressively gotten into and dropped an upsetting amount of money on in the past 2 years. And I'm sure that plenty of other people have things that they've kind of obsessed over. But how does this relate to games? If anyone has seen the UK 2022 diversity census, it reported that 10% of respondents believe they have ADHD. That is a pretty significant jump from 3% in 2020. There was a slight change in the terminology that they used that allowed people who hadn't gotten a diagnosis, because getting a diagnosis is pretty tough, to respond, as well as the pandemic kind of making everyone have to sit with their brains, which isn't always the easiest thing. But that tells us that given that 4% of the UK population are reported to have ADHD, that's nearly 3 times the national average that work within games. I mean, just from my own personal experience, when I was getting diagnosed, my psychiatrist was just like, oh, there's so many of you. I had another games person yesterday. I was like, we are everywhere. And we also make up a huge number of players. Games are really appealing to us. We clearly love working in games. And that's the first thing that I really want to hammer home. Games are an industry that ADHDers thrive in. So let's appreciate that, you know? And that absolutely goes for me too. I really love this industry for all its ups and downs. And the way that it works with all of the changes in tech and the ways you get to wear lots of different hats is great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I haven't struggled with the way that my brain tends to work. My experience with ADHD has been interesting. I always was like, yeah, sure, I'm a bit weird, but I kind of put that down to kooky British eccentricism. I thrived within structure. I got good grades at school. School still wasn't necessarily super enjoyable, but the structure was good. But anxiety, guilt, and shame were good at keeping things together to a point. Things started to kind of fall apart at A-level. I was finishing all my essays at 3 a.m., and my grades in highly technical subjects like physics were bad. You can only brute force things for so long. That being said, my broad interest in many art forms was really useful. It meant I had a lot of creative control, and I got to use it to speed boost my career. I was able to work on a lot of things throughout the pipeline, and my inability to kind of stay in one place and just do one thing meant that I was doing a lot of talks and going to lots of things because lots of stuff. My conventions and Kickstarter experience also really helped with getting the consumer product side of Fall Guys going. I don't necessarily know if I'd been in that role without it. But there's also things that have been really embarrassing professionally. I am terrible with faces and names. Like, I am abysmal with them, and it's something that is genuinely really anxiety-inducing, especially at these kind of events. It takes a long time for stuff to bake in. Like, I have mixed people up so many times, and it is mortifying that when I got the diagnosis, it was kind of like, it was just relief. I was like, oh my God, there is a reason. I'm not just some kind of insensitive, rude asshole. Like, there's a reason why I can't seem to like memorize stuff as well. But I'm really good with shapes and colors, so that's good. And I'd also get really frustrated with my lack of ability to see personal projects through. Like, has anyone here actually managed to complete Inktober? Like, how? I'm fuming. I have like the assorted shrapnel of a million like inkwells and brush pens just kicking about my flat. But I found that trapping myself in situations helped. If I was in a situation where I had to get something to someone or they'd be really angry with me, like shipping like my Kickstarter orders, that meant I was going to do it. So I kind of had to really lock myself in. But through all of that, I was coping. But I was not thriving. And then something really weird happened. Like, I was kind of happily just kind of getting on with stuff. It was fine. I was dealing with it. And then suddenly I had to be in my house all the time, and there weren't people anywhere. I couldn't focus as well, and it wasn't very nice. And then I couldn't get outside for months, and I had absolutely no novelty, and it was really stressful. And there was this, pandemic situation, and this looming threat was very overwhelming, and all of my structure had just flown out the window, and all the things I'd inadvertently been using to function was gone. Like, I'm sure that for plenty of us, the work from home change was really useful, but everyone got uprooted. And we kind of had to figure out how to navigate that. So my journey through diagnosis, I'll just very quickly go over this, was through the NHS because I didn't want to do all the paperwork for everything else. The NHS has much longer wait times. It can be real long, but it is free, which is nice. And it is worthwhile getting on the wait list regardless of how you get your diagnosis, because the NHS kind of like can be a little bit grumpy about private diagnoses. There's also right to choose, which is kind of like a sneaky middle route where you just fill out some forms and then you can use a private practice with NHS funding. And then there is the private route, which is faster but expensive. You do get more support in finding the right medication, though. But some NHS GPs won't necessarily accept the diagnosis or give medication until you've been stable. So it's a bit of an odd situation. Moving on to the more kind of like juicy part of it, here are some of the core strategies that I found throughout all of this. These are my core strategies, just to remind you. They might not work for you, and that is absolutely fine, but take what works, leave what doesn't. The first thing to do is to really identify your challenges. In preparation for this talk, I spoke to Henry Shelford, the head of ADHD UK, to give me like some general tips. And the main thing that he really hammered home was that ADHD people really need to know themselves. They need to really understand how their brains work. And to do that, you kind of need to dig down the things that are the most kind of blocking the way, like your effectiveness, but also being like finicky about stuff, like allowing yourself to be like, nah, this is not for me, and changing things up as well. So my challenges are organization. I'm generally very organized until I'm not, and then it all kind of falls apart. I have issues with focus and overwhelm. So how do I tackle these things? The first thing that I do, which I think is probably one of the most useful things, is externalizing my brain. This is kind of handling the organization and overwhelm side of things. You can see down here, this is a timeline section of a Notion board, which I find super, super useful, but you can do this in whatever works for you. Google Calendar, a spreadsheet, bullet journals, I use all of them, but the main thing is making it easy for you and it's approachable. So the first thing that I really like to do is schedule time to do future tasks. If I have a few things bearing down upon me in the next few months, even if they're like 2 months away, I'll feel like they're all on top of me right now. Like the threat of something that is 2 months away is as similar as one that is 2 days away. And it's really hard to let go of that, and it makes my brain very loud. So I will set a time when I get to work on that and then allow myself to forget about it, because I know that the system that I have built means that I can let go of that information and trust that it will come back when I need it. The same thing goes with prioritization. You can see down here on this timeline, you've got these little tags. So I've been pushing my new phone contract down the line for like 4 months. But it means that when I am feeling overwhelmed, I can be like, you know what? Don't need to do that. I've already set the prioritization, so I can let go of it. And it kind of gives me the decision made already. And then cut out everything that makes it annoying. One of my good friends shared with me her travel Notion page, and it caused me so much stress just to engage with it. I was like, absolutely not. I'm just going to make it on Google Sheets. Like, I'm just going to put my itinerary there. I don't want to deal with that. So you don't want it to be a chore to utilize. So strip out everything you won't use. Another one is artificial or very real urgency. I love a deadline. Love the adrenaline that comes with it. You can kind of set these up even if they're not real deadlines. I talked about this in the MCV interview that I did. But one of the things that I did when I was struggling to get my short story writing homework done was tell my friend I'll give you £15 if I don't get it done in the next hour. And my friend, understanding things much more than I did, I was like, that's cool, but I'm going to take that £15 and donate it to the Church of Scientology because you're going to be fuming. I have never written a short story faster. So that really worked for me. I know timers really work for some people. Me personally, the Pomodoro technique makes me want to put my head in a bath and scream. I just absolutely loathe it because I find that if I'm 30 minutes into something, I don't want to get pulled out of it because then I won't get back in. But having a timer that's like, I'll just work on this for 5 minutes, stuff like that can be enough to get you going on a task. Another one that is really helpful for focus for me is body doubling. I kind of see myself as a human Labrador. Like the minute that I see someone else doing something, I kind of want to do it too. And that's been incredibly useful when I'm working within studios. It's something that I've been doing for years without realizing. I did Twitch streaming. I used to just go on Google Hangouts or Google Meets and share my screen for hours, or just sit in Discord voice channels just so I had the presence of another person to focus me. External accountability helps a ton. Then there is exercise and sleep. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just, if you just slept well and ate vegetables, then you'd be fine. Like, it's not like that. The thing is, what ADHD people get out of exercise is a bit different to everyone else. Morning exercise is amazing for us. It makes our brain a lot less busy. And even if you aren't doing that, like getting up and moving your body, dancing to music, it's really helpful when you kind of need a reset. And at least, I don't know, even if it isn't like super, super active, you kind of get to laugh at yourself, and that kind of helps. Sleep can also be a real challenge for us. Did you know that the symptoms of sleep deprivation are basically ADHD? So when we are sleep deprived, we're just giving ourselves more ADHD, which is great, love that. But it does become a vicious cycle. So be really protective about it. The phrase, if you think everyone hates you, go to bed. If you hate everyone, have a snack, I think applies doubly to ADHD in this situation. And then in terms of organization and focus, I think scene setting is really useful, but it can be overlooked a lot of the time. I think it's especially relevant to artists. I found myself really hating being at my desk, but it's because I had a laptop shoved in the corner and just cables everywhere. It was giving me back pain. So I kind of reworked it, and here's some ADHD workspace tips. First of all, make sure you are comfortable. ADHD people really don't tend to like having that discomfort, and make sure that the objects you interact with are enjoyable. I got this really pretty, like, massive desk mat that meant that I could shift my mouse around because I'm a bit ambidextrous and like use it on either side, and I wasn't having to faff around with it. I listened to a bunch of like keycap sounds, then found out the one that I liked the most. So I got like a keyboard that felt good to type on. Really try to invoke the kind of work that you want to do in that space as well by kind of adding visual interest. And then for like very kind of nitty-gritty ADHD tips that I find super useful, if you are temperature sensitive, I hate being cold. A blanket is great. However, I have a weighted blanket, and the faff of taking it off once I'm kind of locked in is like higher than the urge to wander off. And so I kind of trap myself at my desk, which is really useful. I also have like the little fidget toys and stuff. And I don't know, I'll be working and I'll be like, I'm thirsty. And I just won't get up and get some water, or I'll get up and I'll have like 3 gulps of water at the sink and then like go back to my desk and be like, oh, I'm still thirsty. So having a massive water bottle has been really helpful. Actually, just one second here. There you go. I live in fear of doing that because I'm so worried I'm just going to choke and spit it everywhere. But with all of this, it isn't just like, ooh, make your workspace tidy. It's about being really granular about why you like being there. Things that make you happy being in that space, even if you kind of feel like a bit of a toddler being like, I like my blue and orange desk, which is mine. It's important and useful. Get really granular about it. It's very, very valuable. And then scene setting takes place digitally as well, especially the artists. I really find that when I'm looking at work that's relevant to my work, it kind of gets me a bit more excited. Like I have to really work at scene setting for that, especially if I'm working in a different style. I also try to do that with music as well, finding stuff that empowers the energy that I need. Also, adjust your background noise. I really recommend a website called mynoise.net, which is a free kind of sound blending website. And it really helps to kind of keep me in the moment. Something that kind of covers organization, focus, and overwhelm is systems, not habits. We tend to really struggle with self-defined schedules and habits. We seek novelty. We want to change things up. So it's good to build systems based on your energy levels and interests. We tend to work on a now and not now system as well. So if we can make these systems immediately accessible to us, we're going to use them. We're going to engage with them way more. A very simple example of now or not now for me is the gun hoover that I got, because I really struggle just plugging things in and like hoovering around, but now I can just get it off the wall. It's bliss. I love hoovering now. It's great fun. But an example of like a system, not a habit, is I don't know if anyone else went through that phase of wanting to be like a kind of that girl, Patrick Bateman girl bossification thing, where you like wake up every morning, you do yoga, you drink green juice, and you're just there like, this time if I actually focus, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be this person if I'm strong and capable, and oh god damn it, I'm not doing it again. It's inflexible, it's prone to failure, and you burn out because you're like, this habit isn't going to work for me. So give yourself a fighting chance. For the longest time, I didn't allow myself adjustments because I felt like they were taking an easy way out, akin to failing. If I couldn't do it perfectly, then I just needed to try harder. I'd crash out of my new personality, and then I'd just feel crap about myself. So, for example, with this that girl idea, maybe just have some green juice in the fridge. Opt for frozen fruits so you don't feel like the worst person ever throwing another punnet of fresh raspberries into the bin. Have a yoga mat already set up, and if you don't want to do yoga, just kind of roll around on it. Stock high-protein cereal bars like in a cute pot next to your desk so you are eating something. Sometimes you will have the energy to do all of these steps, but other times you won't. And that's okay. I think a more kind of games-related example is, show of hands, who's tried to learn Blender? Good, yeah, that's what I thought. So I've definitely gone through phases of being like, I'm gonna learn Blender, this is the time, I'm gonna learn Blender. And I'll be like, I'm gonna do an hour of Blender tutorials every night. This is it. Nah, didn't manage it. But that's a habit that is prone to failure. If you want to turn that into a system, maybe you have a PDF of shortcuts that you can look at on low energy days. Maybe you can look at work that inspires you. Sometimes you can do 15 minutes of a tutorial, and other times you can do like 2 hours. It's about taking those little steps and not having a rigid system that doesn't flex. So those are some of the strategies that I use to deal with those kind of like challenges, but I think it's worthwhile talking about medication. It's always a bit nerve-wracking. I mean, doing this entire thing is nerve-wracking, but it's really nerve-wracking talking about meds because I feel it's a bit more taboo, like standing up on stage being like, hello, everyone, I take legal amphetamines. Like, it's a lot, you know? It's really, really nerve-wracking. But it's good to talk about. They aren't necessarily a silver bullet, but they are really helpful. They are good at getting you to do the things that you want to do but are struggling to focus on, but if you really don't want to do them, you're still not gonna. One of the things that I want to impress upon everyone is eat breakfast. Otherwise you'll get the afternoon sads, or at least I do, and a lot of my friends do. So that's like a kind of hot experience tip for you. But everyone works really differently on them. They've really reduced my anxiety. I don't need body doubling when I'm on meds, but I also struggle with forming faster sentences and like riffing on ideas as much. But I can write paragraphs without really like feeling like I'm pulling teeth. So it really varies, and you do find yourself structuring your day around them. Now, I know this talk has largely been framed around art and design, and well, I said it was, but I found that a lot of the stuff that I was talking about could really be applied to a lot of things. That being said, there are definitely some things that can be art-specific. Similar to making now easier, make the activation energy of getting back into a piece as low as is feasibly possible. Circle the things you need to come back to, leave fun notes on the work that you're doing. When you've finished a piece, set up the next ones so that you aren't like, oh my God, I've got to set up the file and I've got to block some stuff out. Like, even if you're just throwing shapes down, that kind of approach really helps me. I also like to work with multiple projects open because jumping around between stuff, if I've still got the energy to paint but I'm feeling stuck and frustrated, at least I can jump over to something else and I'll be kind of mulling things over in the back of my mind even if I'm not necessarily aware of it. And save specific tasks at certain times of day. UV unwrapping only happens at 4 p.m. in this household. I won't do it at any other time. I know which times are best for me to come up with new ideas. I know which times are best for me to have meetings, and I really try to structure my day effectively that way. And also, if you are someone like me that really likes a broad spread of art kind of methods, I personally like to focus on themes. I mean, my kind of work is bright, sunny, friendly environments that tend to be stylized, rather than deep discipline specialization. It's also really good for indie or for leadership because you end up with a really broad amount of experience, and you can kind of feed back on lots of different areas. And then working within a team structure. So it's been interesting moving more into like a leadership kind of role as I ended up going and having, 4, 5 one-to-ones that I was having and direct reports. Suddenly, my systems that I had weren't cutting it because I was just there with my bullet journal, just desperately flipping through everything, trying to find the last stuff. So finding a note structure that really worked with me that had like dates and times and highlighting and being able to link to different areas was super, super handy. It's also really good to work with your line manager and figure out shorter deadlines or more regular check-ins if that's something that you'd find helpful. And, same thing if you're managing someone who prefers that kind of thing. Also get specific about how you best take feedback. Some people really like written feedback in actionable bullet points, and some people prefer to have a deep kind of personal one-to-one conversation so they can understand kind of the energy and the vibe that you're going for as well. Same thing goes for writing briefs. One thing that I think is really helpful that it would be great to see happen more frequently is having dedicated quiet desk areas. It's one of those situations where adaptations are essential for some, but good for everyone. And some people just need to have an area that is free from distraction. So if that's something that you think you'd really benefit from, it's worthwhile asking. Also, block out time in your calendar where you won't get constant pings. Like, it's all well and good closing Slack, but I'll always have that kind of urge to just like, oh, what if I'm missing something? What if I'm missing something? And enforcing do not disturb time and blocking out time in my calendar for like deep work is so vital. So I would really recommend doing that too. And another thing that I think is really worthwhile kind of mentioning is access to work. It wasn't something I was familiar with until I spoke to ADHD UK, but it's a grant that you can, it's a pretty sizable grant actually, that you can utilize to get support within the workplace. Some ADHD people have got access to noise cancelling headphones. Some have had help with filing. You can get ADHD coaching, organizational support, like external accountability. It's really worthwhile checking out, and it's something that I didn't even know existed. So we are now into the final kind of like headlong last bit of the talk, but I did talk about weird things that help. This is like a kind of incomprehensible mood board, but well. So weird things that help that I feel are very specific to ADHD people. Maybe this is less weird, but voice dictation is great for me. When I have to write a large amount of text, I will often just go to the park and talk up my phone whilst walking. And then I can use the speech to text to edit everything down because I find that's a much easier way to get that out of my brain. Shoes on in working hours is one that because I tweeted about this and asked people like their tips, and this came through over and over again. And to be fair, I do it too. When I have like a big kind of meeting, I mean, I'm doing it right now. Like when I need to feel confident, I wear a big shoe and then it's fine. But I do that all the time. And it really, I don't know, the pressure helps, but also it feels like I'm not just in my house in my pajamas. Separate work and play spaces are really useful, even if they're just separate accounts. Saying, I'm not doing it over and over while you do it is actually quite useful. And once again, you feel a bit silly when you're doing it, but it does kind of work. Listening to an album of a band you're really obsessed with as a teenager very loudly tends to be a good one for kicking my brain up a gear when I really need to get hyped for working on a new piece. Fun pens. Like, honestly, love fun pens. I didn't really get along with bullet journaling, and to be fair, the whole like aesthetic bullet journaling thing is exhausting. But I now theme all of my like highlighter and like cross-out pens to the seasons because I'm just eternally extra. But it's very helpful. Also put on a powerful outfit, of course. I feel like that ties into the shoes thing. But dressing up and feeling like more confident about yourself is really helpful because, you know, a lot of ADHD people struggle with feeling confident and decisive because of the way that society be. So there's also getting up and jumping up and down a bunch. Once again, that comes back to movement. One thing that I find so useful, which I have been sneakily doing throughout this talk, is the looping, satisfying animation GIFs. Because I find that if I don't have like front brain and back brain activated, then I struggle to pay attention. But if I'm in like a very important but maybe a little bit dry meeting, I'll have just a compilation video of satisfying 3D animations playing in the background so that I'm able to like look at that but actually hear what's going on. Rolling a dice on a task list is a great way to kind of break that stuck feeling. And light a candle. I don't know, maybe I'm just incurably bougie. But there's something about it, it feels like a special occasion. And then I'm like, okay, cool, I've lit a candle. I can do this now. But throughout all of this, it's all about radical self-acceptance, knowing that your brain works differently, but it's different, not bad. And radical self-knowledge, really understanding what makes you tick, what you don't get along with, and making peace with that. And I want to close out with things that we're good at because we're good at stuff. We're really good at stuff. We're great at idea generation and flowing from one idea to the next. Like we make leaps that we wouldn't, like that other people might not necessarily make, and we can just go in a whole bunch of different directions. That's why I worked so well on the pitch team. You just grab an idea and then you're like, oh, what about this thing? It's great. We can also have really deep, specific knowledge of subject matter. And even if it's kind of random, I find that everything gets folded back in at the end of the day. We're good in a crisis. There's a reason why a lot of paramedics have ADHD. We love adrenaline. And we're really good leaders, and we're great generalists. As I mentioned before, having that wide amount of knowledge is extremely useful. And we're good at working in video games. We're good. Like, there's so many of us. We're here, and we're really good. And I really want to kind of drill down on that. It's important. So, conclusions and takeaways. Let your brain breathe. You can externalize it and kind of give yourself a bit of room so you can kind of think again and it's less noisy. Get support from others. Do it through body doubling, help with starting things. You're not alone and you have support structures to lean on. Systems, not habits. Let things be flexible and don't beat yourself up when things might not fit that perfect ideal that you've built up in your head. And assess how things have worked for you and accept what doesn't. Some things just won't work out and it doesn't make you a failure if it's not kind of going that way. And power dress at all times. If I can leave anyone with that message, shoes on in working hours, big shoes, big fan. Because ultimately we are capable, empathetic, and really creative people. There's so many of us in this industry who can advocate and support each other. We have done so much already, and we will continue to do so. We can do really cool stuff together if we all kind of do the thing. So thank you very much for listening. As an aside, I'd like to give a massive thank you to Henry Shelford and ADHD UK for going over this. Also, if you scan that QR code, Adam Clues-Boyne has been working to put together a bunch of ADHD in games resources. And if you want to kind of be involved and see when they're launching, you can sign up and find out when that's happening. So yeah, I think we got time for questions. I'm so relieved. I was so worried I was going to go massively over time, but cool. God bless talking quickly. Yep, but you have to wait for the microphone.
Hello, clone. I feel very seen, so thank you for all that and the sort of mirror energy and like, yes, good, yes. So very often time in these talks, it's like, if they're giving you work advice of like how to ask for the environment you need from your employer, how to get what you need. Have you had any experience or thought on like, how do you make sure, and for context, I'm trying to start a game studio alone, so it's like ADHD hard mode. How do you have the opposite conversation with like how to make sure with like your coworker or your subordinate that you're not too much or something? Like, how do you have the reverse conversation? Like, is my ADHD okay for you, not ADHD person? Because it's got to be a two-way street.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, a lot of that comes from open communication, and also, like, there's a lot of benefits I've found in like ADHD coaching as well, and being able to bounce ideas off often their ADHD as well, and have that kind of experience in those environments. I find that has been very useful. I've only had a few sessions, but I found that kind of provided me some context when I was feeling a bit stuck. It's also just worthwhile, I guess, asking how best they like to receive things, right? It's, I guess, not wildly different. Like if they are finding that, and this is something that I've dealt with as well, like I'm just like, oh yeah, everyone loves to have a chat. Everyone loves to, have a little vibey chat. It's great. No, it's not the case always. Sometimes like people much prefer, a thumbnail drawing or like an annotated kind of very in-depth piece of feedback. And I think a lot of that is just asking people what they need. So it's not a very in-depth answer, but I find that just cool. I've run out of words. Sorry. Sorry. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was really insightful. And yeah, I'm somebody who definitely goes through periods of like either being super focused on a task or not being able to focus at all. Like I'm not diagnosed by ADHD or anything, but because I'm flexi hours, then it's like, oh, how do you, I guess, like if you're in a slump of like, I'm not wanting to do this task, it needs to be done for tomorrow, but headspace is not there for it. I guess, how do you manage a healthy work-life balance, I guess, whenever you are going through periods of like, I cannot focus on this for the life of me?
Yeah, usually in those situations, I really need a reset. And of course, having like a nice kind of chill evening where I just don't do anything is nice, but it might not solve the immediate problem if I've got a deadline. But I think there is usually almost always time to have a little bit of a reset. I definitely found that when I was really getting very stressed, I would just like aggressively run around the park listening to like profoundly angsty music. And that seemed to get it away from me. I don't know if it's true or not. This might be complete nonsense, but apparently like if you run when you're feeling anxious, your body's like, oh, you're running away from a predator, so that's good. I don't think that's true, but trying to like get that little bit of a reset, some distance is helpful. But then also asking for help. Like I've had moments where it's like, oh my God, I can't do this thing. Being like, can you digitally sit with me while I just do this difficult task? That can be really helpful. Also making kind of an event out of it. Like back when I was still doing my like self-assessment taxes, which was hell, I would kind of make a special, like it was a set day, I would sit down, I would have like little treats around it, like I'd make it an event so it wasn't quite so painful. And I think just trying all of the positive things that I can to remove myself from that headspace and also like set myself into like a positive environment, probably the best thing that I can do. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will be trying all those.
Cool. Yep. I'm so sorry, I'm making you go to many different locations.
Hey. So you mentioned note-taking and organization. I tend to kind of court report everything anyone ever says to me for it to be never seen ever again.
Yeah.
Just because of memory issues. Do you have any suggestions of note-taking tools or programs that kind of keep you organized?
I really like Notion.
Notion.
But I feel like that's like, I don't know, it feels vaguely basic of me to say at this point because everyone loves Notion, it seems. Or maybe it's just my very small group of friends who are like, but I find Notion super useful because you can link it to a whole bunch of different places. It can look cute. And it's relatively easy to like put priorities on stuff, like tag stuff. I also used Obsidian, which is a free tool, which is just very basic. It's got like basic markup, but I find that even just having like a dedicated space for that is pretty useful, and you can structure like the notes that you have and nest stuff and that kind of thing. It's definitely better than Google Docs where everything just kind of like goes into a bucket and maybe it'll turn up. So yeah, having like a dedicated like note-taking app that you can build a structure from is really useful. Structuring and highlighting stuff is probably the most useful thing for me.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
And thank you for a lovely talk before I ask my question. So many times, I think like personally, professionally, academically, blah, 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 I've literally like had people like excuse myself, like on behalf of myself to everyone else for being like too much or, you know, very ADHD basically. And I was just wondering like, how do you be your ADHD self but in a professional capacity, like, because I think it's like a very hard balance. You know, I don't want someone telling me you can't be yourself, like you're too much, but then I also don't want to put people off. So like, how do you have any tips for like sort of balancing that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I've been very lucky that the environments that I've been in have been pretty ADHD friendly anyway. But there have been moments where I'm like, Anna, stop talking. Just you don't need to. I tend to have there's a few like things that I kind of built up as a mental checklist, and I think it's worthwhile thinking about maybe the things that you most get. Not necessarily that people are like, oh, you need to stop doing that, but the stuff that doesn't necessarily make you feel good when you're doing it. One of my things is when I'm not on meds, I feel like I have to entertain everyone. And so I just keep talking because I take responsibility for everyone else's happiness. And I'm just like, people are quiet. I need to fill that silence. I'm not tolerating the silence very effectively. And so it's not so much, here are the things I need to do to be less annoying because I don't like that. It's more, here are the things that I am allowed to do that don't make me bad. Like, I don't have to fill the silence all the time. I don't have to be responsible for everyone's entertainment. And kind of having that, even if it's like a little post-it note, like, you can say no, people aren't going to be mad at you. I think it's worthwhile thinking about the things that you find difficult to deal with and working from there. Saw some questions on this side.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the presentation. The GIFs genuinely did help me focus, so thanks for that.
Nice.
I have a small question about, honestly, the opposite side of ADHD. So with the games industry being as creative and interesting as it is, I struggle a lot with hyperfocus, where I'll be given a task and then all of a sudden it's 8 p.m., I haven't had dinner, and I'm like, oh my God, what's happened with my day? Do you have any tips for just kind of turning off, especially outside of work hours?
That's a really good question. I think, because I have definitely had moments where I'm like, this is it. I'm just going to do this until 2 a.m. Oh, here we go. Yeah, like I've been very kind of careful about having like clear boundaries with work, because I know that if I slip, it'll like, but when I'm working on personal stuff, I'll definitely be like, oh my God, it's very late. It's something that if you can, like everyone's like, set a timer, I'll remind you, but that doesn't necessarily feel like it might work. But if you can have someone that can remind you like in person or give you a call, that's great. But I find if you can set stuff up where you almost have a responsibility to go somewhere else afterward, whether it's like, I don't know, like a class or like a kind of sports thing or just something that forces you to have a bit of a break and will also occupy your brain enough to kind of, I don't know, wash it out, like kind of rinse the work out of it. That can be really helpful. I'm really into roller skating, and when I'm really stressed about a work problem, I'll just like spin around in the park a bit, and that tends to, I don't know, it shakes all the work out, I suppose. So yeah, I think having something that you might feel vaguely responsible to attend, that can be useful. Because I don't know, it depends how people work, but if I'm like, oh my God, I've signed up to do this thing, I've got to do it, otherwise they're going to be mad at me, that does kind of tear me away.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool, I think that's all the questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Come up after. Cool, awesome. I'm going to be about if people want to chat, but if not, I relinquish you to Bar. Thank you so much for coming along.